Alrighty, how's it going, everybody? I hadn't done a video in a while because I'm still in the middle of doing my song that you are actually going to get. I'm still in the middle of that. For those that are new to the channel, I'll call my channel Mark's Music Place. My name is Mark, and I hadn't done a video in a while. So if you're new to the channel, please subscribe. Go ahead and subscribe, share, definitely write some comments and all that. It helps with the channel. What I want to talk about is preamps. Now, last I talked about, one video I talked about microphones, such as ribbon microphones. I didn't really get into a whole lot of details about microphones because there are certain types of microphones. You have small condenser, diaphragm condenser microphones. There are large diaphragm microphones. There are tube microphones. There are solid state microphones. There are ribbon microphones. There are dynamic microphones. Now, with microphones, if you mirror that with the preamp and maybe a couple other pieces of gear in the signal chain, that's pretty much the process for the recording aspect. In the old system, how it would work was that everything would go through the console, and you had an option to either go through a certain type of external preamp, or you had an option to use the preamp in the console. A lot of times, a lot of engineers would want to use, I guess this is, let me slide the camera back a little bit so that give me a little bit more space. I was trying to get you so you can get an angle of some of the preamps over here, but these are all preamps in this row right here. But to not take into account that there's also preamps on every channel. And the reason being is because a lot of times people will get the misconception that a preamp must be this, it has to be a 19-inch rack mount preamp for it to be a preamp, and that is not true. Your preamp is the preamp that comes the first. Most of the time, it's the first part when you plug something into to a mixing console. The first thing that's going to hit is a preamp. And there are several preamps within the console. Even your auxiliary SIN, if it has a volume control, it's going through a preamp, believe it or not. Certain preamps use certain op amps or tubes, or a combination of tubes and transformers, or op amps and transformers, and so forth. It just depends on the sound of the preamp, and the sound of the preamp, believe it or not, the sound of the preamp in conjunction to the style of microphone can really alter the sound of the recording. Now, this is only meaningful or purposeful or has any purpose if you're going to use any outside source. If you use a lot of virtual instruments, like if you use a lot of you're going to use a lot of plugins, or you're going to use a lot of samples. You're going to use your beat maker. You're going to use internal drums. You're going to use a drum program. You're going to use, if you're going to use drum programs, or if you're going to use anything that requires virtual instruments, sounds from your plugins. You're going to use your keyboards or any of that, then really it's only going to matter how you process that recorder, and that's going to be a different video. But for the purpose of needing to use microphones, as an example, if you're going to record guitars, bass guitars, guitar cabinets, acoustic guitars, vocals, external instruments, anything acoustically, what we call analog acoustic, basically a trumpet or a trombone or sax. The choice of microphones that you're going to use, whether you're going to use ribbons, you're going to use dynamic microphones like an SM57, you're going to use, are you going to use solid state condenser? Are you going to use a tube condenser? And all that mirrored with a pair of preamps. Some preamps have tubes in them, some are solid state. Some preamps have transformers, some of them don't. Some of them are just op amps only. It just depends on the preamp and how much color and warmth you really want to add. But most of the time, that's why more of the vintage nostalgic type of vintage preamps, such as Need 1073s or API preamps or whatever, are most sought after for their warmth because of the use of transformers and electronics. The console adds color to the sound as well, but the most in-depth before you go to a tape machine would have been the microphone choice and the preamp. So in essence of the recording aspect of why if you're wondering what's really giving these commercial studios a really good shining sound, what's really making them shine is 4 factors: the source, which is the musician or the vocalist, and the choice of instrument they're using. You know, like if this guy had like a pair, if you're a drummer, a Pearl or a Tama versus a Ludwig versus Yamaha versus a DW drum set, and the way he plays it, and the skins, the heads, the way he Vic First sticks and all that, and the way he hits the drums is going to matter to how the microphone and preamp captures that. The choice of microphone on that drum kit can matter where it's placed, the distance and proximity to the source, the room that it's in, and of course the microphone, the choice of microphone and the preamp. Those are the main biggest factors. Now there are always sometimes, if it's going through a console, most of the time they try to avoid as much EQ as possible, but EQ can be used in place. Sometimes there's EQ on the console going to the preamps console and the EQ, or a lot of times they'll use an external preamp and an external and so on, because these preamps may have transformers or tubes or whatever, discrete op amps, certain circuits to really make that shine over just not using it. So it's all a matter of choice and what you're trying to capture. Over the years, there are a lot of people say, well, what's the best? Should I go with? Should I go with this preamp? Should I go with that preamp? Should I go with this microphone? What should I use to get the best source? And I'm going to tell you right now, there's never been a direct answer, even to this day, because the factors of the person playing the instrument or the person singing is going to change from person to person. So the engineer has to be able to adjust every single time, even to an engineer that's been doing this for 30, 40, 50 years. Still always have to adjust because they have to listen to the instrument. They're always monitoring what room they're in, where the microphone's being placed. They have to get it right every single time. Then they say, okay, well, based on my experience, this guy's using this type of trumpet or this type of saxophone or this type of trombone or this violin or this guitar. He's going to use this. He's going to use a Fender or he could be using an EVH, which is, EVH amp, or a Fender, or he could be using a Mesa Boogie or a Marshall cabinet with this type of speakers and the settings, and on top of that, the room is in. Do you need to use gobos, which are sounds isolating separators within the room? He's got to take all that into account, and then he's deciding if, like, let's say you had a Neve VR console, am I going to use the preamp within the console itself, or am I going to use an external preamp? He's deciding all that because you can only get these recordings once or twice. He don't get a chance to experiment with whole ranges of preamps and all that, because recording is money and time is money. So most of the time he's going to go with his gut instinct. But for the most part, if he's got experience with realizing I'm going to use this type of microphone, I'm going to use this condenser, this FET, this tube microphone, and I'm going to use it on this particular, I'm going to place it here, and I'm going to use this preamp. Most of the time, 90% of the time, it's going to come out pretty good with just doing it for years and years and years. So, with that being said, the last thing I want to talk about is I got a few preamps here. And I'm going to start with the preamp in the console. Don't let the preamp in the console, because like this is an Allen & Heath console. I don't care if you got Allen & Heath, a Behringer, a Mackie, a Yamaha, a PV. What you have to do is really pay attention to, always try the preamp in your console first, if you got one. And really, you know, try different microphones on it. If you got some downtime, that's the time to be plugging microphones within the preamp in your console and saying, do I like the sound of this microphone going through the preamp in the console? Try it. And a lot of times, most of the time, you probably will, because switching out microphones alone can change the character. You know, I'm going to use this SM58 on vocals. And use the microphone preamp within the console, and it might just be perfect. And you're like, well, you know, that's all I need is just use the preamp. And that's what I'm going to send to my audio interface, because your audio interface, I don't care what you're using, that's what is going to capture the sound of the input source. It's going to capture that source. So if it captures that source, that's what you're going to hear within your DAW. Is what because the interface is just converting from analog to digital. Meaning it's going from a wave signal to digital, which is nothing but ones and zeros, binary. The computer is you know, because computer doesn't make sound. And for those that don't know, they might well, you know, if you don't have an audio interface in your computer, well, most computers have sound cards built right on the motherboard within the Mac or the PC. There's a sound card. It's an AD to DA converter. It is. It's just not as good as an aftermarket ADD converter for the most part. But in some instances, some motherboards, when you buy a computer, if you're into gaming, some advanced upgraded motherboards would come with better sound cards and better graphic video cards for gaming, as an example. You see extreme details within video, whether you're watching YouTube or you're playing a game, like a first-person shoot 'em game or whatever. But aftermarket ADD D80 converters, like, I don't care if you go to M Audio, Focusrite, it doesn't matter, Burrow, it doesn't matter. Most of the time, those AD to DA converters are going to be so much better for music, especially for production. So that's what your AD to DA converter's capturing, whatever the microphone preamp. And if you decide you're going to use external preamps, or you're going to use, and you're going to correlation with some sort of, most of the time, in most cases, pros like to use a preamp and make some sort of compressor, at least minimum, to control volume peaks and levels within the recording so that it'll come out. So you're not pinging and redlining and distorting the signal. So they're going to use some sort of compressor to control, especially on vocals, or loud sources like guitars or drums. So with that being said, the last thing I want to talk about is a few things. I want to talk about the preamps, and we'll be done with the video. I'm going to bring the camera closer. What we have over here is just the assortment of preamps. Some of these have tubes in them, like the Arts and so forth. I don't know if you can see how well you can see some of these as I'm pointing. Like for example, this is the Warm Audio Tone Beast. It's got input and output transformers and a discrete op amps, and it's got basically the API, which is the most sought after. Those are one of the most sought after type of preamps. It's got those circuitry in it. And then of course I got my Altron, which is, these are mimicked after the Need 1073. These also has input and output transformers with EQ. And of course I have, like everyone knows about the Avalon. That is like the beast for recording vocals. You'll see these in a ton of pro level studios. The Avalon, it's got 5 tubes in it. It's got input and output transformers, discrete op amps, and so forth. Tube circuit. Amazing sounding preamp. Then of course the studio channels got preamp tubes in them. The ARC Pro MPAs down here also have tubes in them, and then a few solid states. These also have tubes in them, and the circuits, as well as and even in the console, there's tubes. There's not tubes, but these are better sounding than probably low class, because this is considered semi-modular. That's a different story. That's a different video. But these have the upgraded preamps and upgraded EQs in them on the Allen Eve. So, with that being said, when it comes to mirroring a certain preamp with a certain microphone to capture certain sources, that's usually with the right source, meaning the musician and the gear they're using. If they're using really good, exceptional sounding instruments, or a very amazing sounding vocalist with a really good choice of a microphone, and you're going to run it through a really nice sounding preamp, and that's going to run through, whether you're going to run through a console or you're going to run directly into your interface. That's really it, because preamps they're important, but they can also be overrated. A lot of people think, well, the preamps is going to be the magic to my recording, and actuality, the preamp is just one source of it. You're going to need a good recording source, which means if the person has a crappy sounding instrument, it's not going to sound good, period. Or if the person can't sing, and that's the one thing I hate when people do demonstration videos and they'll demonstrate a piece of gear like a microphone or a preamp, and they're a horrible singer. I can't watch the video because they're a horrible singer. I don't care how good the preamp is. If they're a bad singer, it's not going to sound good. And I'm a decent singer, but that's why I don't do vocal demonstrating videos with me singing. Some people say you ought to do a vocal, so who knows? But I found some vocalists that really sound good, and you want to be able to really capture how good a person sings when they're a really good singer when you're demoing a microphone and a preamp, as an example. So this is the reason why I like the warm audio videos, because most of the time they have really good singers, and that also helps exacerbate or elevate you wanting the warm audio gear, because you can really sound, man, an amazing singer going through their gear, their microphone, their preamps, and it's going to sound like that. It makes you want to buy the gear. But if you had a really bad singer, horrible singer, or a person had a really bad sounding instrument, you're not going to be able to look past trying to hear the quality of the preamp or the microphone, because the singer sounds so bad or the instrument sounds bad. So, to sum it up, that, like I said, all this really matters if you're going to try to record an external source. It's not so much important if you're going to use virtual instruments. That's a different video. So I want to wrap it up on the video on my thoughts on preamps. Preamps are they can matter, but everything else matters with the preamp. So that's going to do it because the recording source, but that's going to do it for this video, because I'm going to say on the recording source, whether I'm recording through the analog, which is going to go to my AD to D, which is it is an AD to DA converter, which is going to convert and go into the computer. But what I'm capturing with the microphone and the preamp and all that, that's what the converter is going to capture. Or if I'm going to record to this ADAT or my hard disk recorder, whatever, the same quality of preamp and microphone, whether it went through to go into Studio One or Pro Tools through the converter here, or it went to this hard disk recorder, or it's going to run to these ADATs or whatever. The source. So let's just sum it up. 4 important factors in acoustic recording. for any studio, whether you do it at home or in a commercial building. And I'm going to talk about commercial buildings because 90% of the houses in Berry Hill and Nashville are houses. They're houses converted into commercial studios. So it's not necessarily the house as it is the space inside the house. But we're going to start with a really good source, meaning the vocalist or the musician and the instrument and how good the instrument they're using. That's number one. How talented they are. How great of a singer or musician they are. That's number one. Number two is the space, the acoustics of the space. That's number two. Number three would be the microphone, the choice of microphone, whether you're going to use a tube, solid state, FET, we're going to use a dynamic, we're going to use a ribbon, a small condenser, large diaphragm condenser. Then we have to mirror that with a good sounding preamp. Whether you're going to use preamps in the console or you're going to use an external preamp. And I got a few more preamps. You can see these more preamps sitting over here. There's a few more preamps here, but these are all preamps. All these are preamps. So I think you're talking 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 19, 20, 21, 22, 24. 24 preamps. Then I also got another preamp, Focusrite, downstairs. And I'm going to invest in quite a few more preamps, just for different colors of sounds that preamps make. So preamps, and that's one of the last, other than maybe mirroring these preamps with maybe a certain compressor to control dynamics and peaks. Dynamics and peaks. Other than that, that's going into your DAW or to your recording source. Whether you're going to use a hard disk recorder, you're going to use whatever you're going to use. Your DAW, your computer, your Mac, your PC, or you're going to use, whatever. Other than that, that's what you're hearing in the DAW if you're going to do acoustic recording. So, like I said, I'm still in the middle of this project. I'm not done, so I don't want people to think that I forgot about that happening. That's getting done. I'm changing courses because I'm hiring musicians and singers for this record I'm going to put out. I was going to just be me, but I said, no, I'm putting this record out. So I'm getting a guitar player and a bass player and singers and all that. So, but other than that, everything else is once you get the recording done, then it's time to do the mixing and the processing, meaning I'm going to mix with certain EQs, compressors, and all that. I'm going to use certain plugins and all that. That's the mixing portion. Then it's time to be mastered. Once it's mastered, then it's ready to be manufactured and distributed. And then it's ready to go. So, other than that, that's going to do it for this video. I just wanted to throw this out there on my thoughts on preamps. Other than that, and the importance of the role they play. So, we're going to still talk about preamp electronics and why certain preamps seem to shine a little bit more than the other one. It has a lot to do with the electronics. So other than that, that's going to do it for this video. Thanks for watching. Y'all have a great one.